Wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine. 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 Wanna move my feet, wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine. 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 Wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please take your seats as this afternoon's stand session is about to begin. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to chair the last panel on the Manchester stand for this edition of MIPIM 2023. So thank you very much for coming along. My name's Dan Whelan, senior reporter at Place Northwest. I've attended a lot of the panel discussions on the Manchester stand this week, and we've heard some exciting topics. Concretine, I got excited about concretine, which was amazing. We've heard about inclusive growth, we've heard about social value, 15-minute cities yesterday with my colleague Julia, which was a fantastic discussion. And today, hopefully, this discussion will knit together some of the themes that we've heard throughout the week. We're going to be talking about levelling up within Greater Manchester, specifically addressing the north-south divide. And joining me is an esteemed panel. From the end, we've got Jeremy Hinds, Director at Savills, Paul Dennett, Deputy Mayor of Greater Manchester, Paul Ormerod, who is the Chair of the Rochdale Development Agency, and Alison McKenzie-Folan, Chief Exec of Wigan Council. So I'm going to start, because Alison has asked me not to start at this end, so I'm going to start with Jeremy. So Jeremy, we're talking about the north-south divide in Greater Manchester. Set the scene for us. How does that manifest? What does it look like? And does it exist in reality?
I think the north-south concept is just an easy one to describe a difference between broadly large areas in the south and larger areas in the north. And it's just a term to reflect the sort of national picture of a north-south divide. So I don't think it's to be taken literally, and it shouldn't be understood as meaning that there aren't any pockets of deprivation in the south and there are no pockets of prosperity in the north either. So it's a sort of dare I suggest a journalistic style reference to the point. But that said, the point I think can be made because there are notable differences in terms of investment returns, property values, aspirational outcomes, lifestyle choices that do mark differences in the expectations of people who live in broadly the north-south of Manchester. And so, and I think there's probably historical reasons connected to that in terms of the connectivity of South Manchester with Cheshire, and there are probably other reasons, though, connected with the industrial decline of north parts of Manchester, and the long-standing inability to provide for social aspirations in the north, so that social mobility is more restricted in the north parts than it is in the southern parts. And so you see manifestations both at a number of sort of matrices or matrix indicators, not just property related, but social and educational and health. And there are indexes across the range which strongly suggest there is a divide.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that point of social aspiration, you're a good case study, Jeremy, aren't you? Because you were born in Rochdale, moved to London, and when you came back, you moved to the south of Manchester, not the north.
Correct. I was born and brought up in Smallbridge, in Rochdale, to be more precise. So that's a council estate, and I now live in Sale.
Okay. And why not? Why didn't you feel that did you feel that you couldn't go back to Rochdale, that you didn't want to? What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, I think that's that's a fair question. I mean, largely, wow. Largely, I think it's about sort of the professional context, who you work with, the surroundings, the attraction of place. So there's a lot of connections about how you work and live your life. And in terms of families, schools, and health, there are stronger connections and pools that have a greater affinity with the sort of background that I now have compared to when I grew up.
Okay. And later on, we'll discuss some solutions to this problem, potential solutions. I'm sure, Jeremy, you have some interesting ideas, I know, because you've already told me, so look forward to discussing those. Paul Dennett, this is not a new discussion, is it? We've been talking about this north-south divide for quite some time, so why are we still having this discussion? What are the barriers stopping us addressing the inequalities?
So I think there is a north-south divide, there's no doubt about it. And anyone who's familiar with the spatial plan for Greater Manchester will know that one of the key aspects of that plan is to try and push economic growth north, you know, beyond the central business district and the south of the city region. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that, you know, many people who live in the north of Greater Manchester also access employment and life either in the central business district or in the south of the conurbation, or even outside of Greater Manchester. So, you know, we've got to be careful here talking about a north-south divide, because actually, you know, when you look at it through the lens of people and what they do, you know, you might get a different response, I think, on this very question. But ultimately, we've pursued an economic strategy of agglomeration for some time now, haven't we? And we've ensured that all the infrastructure is put in place, certainly public transport infrastructure, to connect up big cities as drivers of our economy, but also to try and get people into that central business district where people work and actually contribute to the economy. And I think what we're trying to do now is recalibrate some of that. It's about maintaining the driving central business district, the competitiveness of the south of the city region. But it's also about thinking, well, how can we start doing some of this activity in those northern local authorities? And I think it's fair to say as well, you know, it's also about the regeneration of our townships across Greater Manchester. And I don't think there's a north-south divide on that issue at all. I think if you look at townships across the piece, many of them have been struggling over this period of time and not seeing the levels of investment that we need. But, you know, we have to contextualise all of this. And the context for it is post-industrial decline still has a huge impact on the north of England. We've not seen the level of investment from central government that we rightfully deserve. And some of this is down to, you know, the Treasury's Green Book appraisal in terms of how it allocates capital, you know, with London and the South East primarily benefiting because of the Treasury's infatuation with land value uplift and benefit cost ratios that they operate. So, you know, we do need to contextualise this conversation within that context as well. So the reason why we have a divide is also because central government hasn't been investing enough money in the north because of, you know, the orthodoxy of the Treasury.
Yeah, you mentioned that point about agglomeration and kind of focusing on the city centre to boost growth. Do you think then this change in approach and trying to level up, it means that we have been overly reliant on Manchester and sort of leaning too heavily on Manchester for too long?
No, I don't think that at all. I think, you know, we need the central business district of Greater Manchester to succeed. And, you know, we've gone through really challenging times, you know, post-bomb, and then what happened then in terms of the total redesign of the city centre of Manchester, bringing people into the city to live, work and play, not just to access employment. So sorting out the central business district is right and proper in terms of our short-term priority. But I think we're at a point now in time where we can genuinely start to recalibrate things, where we can benefit everybody in Greater Manchester by ultimately doing things differently.
Yeah. And Paul and Alison, I want to come to you now and talk about Wigan and Rochdale specifically. So this divide, these inequalities, how do they manifest themselves in Wigan? Give us a few examples of the issues that you're facing.
I think it relates to what Mayor Dennett said really in terms of Wigan's heritage. So if you think about a place like Wigan, powered the world with its coal and it's got a rich industrial legacy. But that industrial legacy gives us major issues with our land reclamation. Yeah. So we've got large proportions of land which we could build 4,000 houses on, but the actual site reclamation costs are really, really expensive. So, you know, people are interested. So we need to be able to come together with people like Homes England, Combined Authority, and you know, these pieces of land have been there for many years, but because they've got lower land values, because it's easier to build in other places where they've got higher yield, it becomes really difficult in places like Wigan because of our industrial heritage. And you know, we have to work through that. It takes time. I think a second big thing for a place like Wigan is skills. So we've had a major transformation, you know, since our economic past of coal mines. But what that transformation has been is traditional manufacturing. So we've got high employment rates, but in those high employment rates, we've got low skill jobs, low wages. We've got low levels of worklessness, but again, it's not in the high sector jobs, it's not in the high paid jobs. And often many of the training aspirations, the high skill jobs, the access to education and high skill training, you know, we've got great FE colleges, but it's not within the borough, and it's hard for people to access those opportunities. So skills is a major issue for a place like Wigan in terms of that north-south divide. And then I think the last issue, which links you know, back to skills, is connectivity. So if anybody's been to Wigan, it's a traditional place with a road infrastructure that is, you know, is not fit for purpose anymore, running along many, you know, 14 district towns, along terrace roads, and we have massive congestion. We've had long-held aspirations to open up a link road between the east and the west, from the M6 to the M61, open up massive development land there for housing and for income generation, commercial sites. But you know, it's really difficult in a place like Wigan, and it drives people to their cars. They can't connect to the, you know, into the city. And I'll come on to Lee maybe a little bit later if we have a little more time to discuss. But you know, we've still got major places that aren't connected either by a railway station or via Metrolink. So people find it hard to access those opportunities. And as Mayor Dennett said, many of the people who live in our borough travel outwards for work, and we need them to stay inwards so we can get those high skill jobs. And for the west of the conurbation, you know, we look to Liverpool City region, we look to Cheshire, we look to Lancashire. So many of the people have got their social connections and work connections not within Greater Manchester. So for places on the outer edges, we also have to think about, you know, those implications as well. So they're the sort of main issues in terms of the things that we need to overcome.
Yeah, it's interesting, that point you make about, you know, people having their social connections elsewhere. And do you feel sometimes that you're a little bit out on a limb in Wigan? Do you feel part of the Greater Manchester family? And do you feel that you're getting the support that you need?
Very much so. I mean, we're here as Greater Manchester, aren't we? We play a major part in the combined authority. It's steeped in a history of amazing work in collaboration, compromise, a bit of tension, as you know. But also, I think many of the people who've been on these panels today have said actually the strength of Greater Manchester is, you know, great political leadership, a GMCA, a combined authority, which in my opinion is the best. It's just had a peer review. If anybody picks up the peer review for the combined authority, you'll see that it's doing amazing work. And I think that combination of strong political leadership, you know, a great GMCA team and 10 boroughs who collectively work together means, you know, we don't feel left out. However, you know, it would be remiss of Wigan not to look to Liverpool City region, not to look to St Helens, not to look to other areas. So, you know, I'm like I'm sure some of you know, some of the other boroughs do as well. So we're definitely part of the family. We're definitely part of the family.
Great to hear. Paul, I'll come to you. In Rochdale, same question. How do the inequalities manifest in Rochdale? What are you trying to overcome?
Well, perhaps if I could talk a bit more broadly, because as well as chairing the Rochdale Development Agency, I also chair the Atom Valley Mayoral Development Zone. And I want to put it in a wider context, because there is a strategy that's worked of levelling up, and that's in East Germany. And the West German government in the last 30 years has spent more than 1 trillion, not a billion, 1,000 billion euros in levelling up. And that's worked. Now, the equivalent to level up the Atom Valley boroughs of Bury, Rochdale and Oldham is £130 million a year, every year, for the next 30 years. So we'd like our first instalment, you know. So that's a measure of the scale of difference between the north and the south of Manchester. Incomes and productivity levels are clearly lower. Now, obviously, there's a mixture within each borough. There are areas which are better off. But I'd also like thinking about joining up and putting it in the context of Greater Manchester. There are several, obviously, key factors that drive it. You mentioned connectivity, that's one of them. There are a number of factors that drive this. But the key thing here is that they all feed back on each other. So what we've got are feedback loops, you know, self-reinforcing processes. So that once an area becomes high productivity, high income, once it's got desirable housing, once it's got good connections, the fact that it is attractive makes it even more attractive. And so it makes the south and the city centre, we can see it in the city centre. I mean, 30 years ago, as we all know, that was, it was a wasteland. And now the positive feedbacks there have transformed it. But it equally applies in reverse in the northern and eastern boroughs, so that we get trapped in, if you like, by negative feedback. And that's what justifies the case for high levels of public spending in these areas to solve the genuine north-south divide, which the Mayor has identified, Mayor Burnham here, has identified as a key policy aim within Greater Manchester.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about Atom Valley then, because we had the budget yesterday, investment zones were mentioned. That seems like a huge opportunity for Greater Manchester in this pursuit of levelling up.
Well, it's quite interesting because if you look I always look in the budget in the appendices that the Treasury publish. They're the interesting bits, and there's an appendix there on the methodology of how they're going to assess investment zones. And it's at the top because they're saying areas which are already high productivity and high innovation, like the agglomerated city centre, they should get they should be part of it, but at the same time, the ones which are left behind, they should also benefit. But I think that we should see this as a great opportunity, because only one sector can benefit according to the rules, but you can have 3 different sites. You can split it up. So from an Atom Valley perspective, we would very much welcome something that focused on advanced machinery, advanced materials in Atom Valley, tying it up with the area around Oxford Road. We very much welcome that, not just because of the benefits of the investment zone, but the closer the connections we have, the closer we're working together, the more that we can benefit from the agglomeration which is taking place and the high productivity that we see in central Manchester.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Mayor Dennett, you spoke yesterday following the budget announcement. You said it was a good day for Greater Manchester, which I think we can all agree on. Fantastic news, lots of things in that budget, which we'll come to in a second. Was it trailblazing?
So for me, I think the announcement yesterday was a step in the right direction. There's no doubt about it. And obviously, what we've been negotiating, the Trailblazer deal, if you like, for devolution, was good. Yeah, all in all, it was a really good deal. But there was announcements yesterday that we weren't even aware of that were coming, which was a kind of Brucey bonus, if you like, for Greater Manchester. My local authority submitted a levelling up bid to purchase the shopping precinct in Eccles. We were told we weren't successful, and the reasoning they gave us for not being successful were land values were not appreciating quick enough and high enough, which is interesting. So we're back into the realms of Green Book appraisal by the Treasury, and lo and behold, yesterday we get told we're getting the £5.4 million, and Wigan were beneficiaries as well yesterday, and Tameside I think got £19.9 million yesterday, so yeah, they really did do very well. So yeah, I think when you look at it in the round, including all of these announcements we weren't anticipating, I think yeah, we've made good progress there. Obviously on housing, I think that was a big announcement for us. We're getting another £150 million worth of brownfield housing fund monies, which, as you know, is really important for Greater Manchester because of those ongoing viability challenges we have when development is being brought forward. We often think, Section 106 payments or community infrastructure payments can deliver everything. Well, they can't, because quite often when schemes are being brought forward, especially in the inflationary and interest rate crisis we find ourselves at the moment, there needs to be that gap funding to deliver those developments. And obviously 150 million is going to do some decent work in Greater Manchester, and that's in addition to everything we've already received on brownfield funding to date. So yeah, I'm optimistic. Obviously there's more. Was it
trailblazing, do you think?
Well, I think, was it trailblazing? You're going to really push me on this, aren't you?
Just say yes. Just say yes.
Yeah. So no, I think it was trailblazing. I think the only sad thing I feel is some of the announcements we have to wait for the next spending review before they ever materialise. And I think at the moment we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. The economy is in a precarious position. government needs to be releasing that money now rather than, waiting till the next spending review, 25, 26. This is too long down the road for me.
Yeah.
We need to be doing this now.
Jeremy, I'm interested to get your views on the budget yesterday and how that might help address the issue that we're talking about today, the North-South divide, and also what you actually think levelling up is, because we hear the phrase a lot, but it's kind of a bit here, there and everywhere. What are your thoughts on that?
Just on the trailblazing point, I know the this government is prone to hyperbole anyway, so there's an element to that. I think, though, in fairness to the government, it's trailblazing probably from the perspective it's creating a framework that's very new. It might not be trailblazing to Manchester or indeed West Midlands as well, in the sense that it's delivering today what the local authorities have asked for. So it's not trailblazing at all in that sense. But in terms of creating a concept of shifting power and enabling a conversation to really take place as to how Westminster will continue to devolve into the regions. I think if you look at it from that perspective, you can characterise certain elements of it as trailblazing, and really the onus responsibility now lies with the two combined authorities working with government to enable it to be a blueprint to be rolled out. So I'm pretty confident that that's not a problem for Manchester. And I think the announcement of in the devolution paper yesterday shows just how much hard work has been put into conversations between central government by the two combined authorities and Manchester in particular. So it's a very successful outcome in that respect. I can't remember what you asked me now.
Yes, I asked you what levelling up should look like, what it means to you. Does it mean, for example, raising property values in every borough in Greater Manchester, or does it mean something different?
It's going to be a different thing to all sorts of people. But I think ultimately, if it's going to mean anything, the tangibility of it will rest with how it affects the lives of the people who live in the city. And therefore, really, we're looking at it as quite a granular sense. And from my point of view, going back to your question about my background, from my point of view, I think the reality of levelling up will be seen in people being proud of where they are born, where they're educated, want to stay there, their own aspirations, however they define what their life to be, can be met locally, and they don't have to go and find that elsewhere. Okay. So I think levelling up has to be meaningful at the level of us. It can't be meaningful just in the sense of looking at it on a spreadsheet and say property values have gone up. That would probably happen, but that shouldn't be the driving factor for a sensible levelling up policy.
Okay. And Paul, we had a little chat outside just before about, the government is handing over these levers, some of these levers now to Greater Manchester, and the pressure is on that they can prove that the devolution was a good idea. Do you think that the combined authority is up to the challenge?
Well, definitely. I do think I think it's actually quite a major step forward. Even though you say, is it trailblazing? Well, the trail was blazed. We knew it was going to happen. But if you think about it, I mean, Britain is, and certainly now England, we've got to say, is probably the most centralised state in Western Europe. And so, I think my feeling is this will just be the start. And if this works well, it'll be devolved more. But you're right. I mean, it does say the government can then turn around in a few years' time and say, well, you criticise us, but you've not delivered. But I think we will. I think we definitely will. I was going to say, rather frivolously, if we look at, say, a benchmark to judge ourselves against in terms of devolved authorities, well, we've got a Scottish and the Welsh government, so we don't have much to beat. No.
Anyone from Scotland or Wales? Oh, Laura's over there. Yes, Laura. Okay, Alison, what were your takeaways? 150 million brownfield funding could go some way to helping to plug those viability gaps that you mentioned to deliver the housing. What were your thoughts on the budget and the devolution deal?
I think, as other panel members have said, it's definitely significant progress. And I think we should pay a huge tribute, actually, to the politicians and the officer team that are involved, because it did take a lot of effort, a lot of negotiation and a lot of going in backwards and forwards. So I think, Mayor Dennett, we can pay tribute to the politicians and the officers. I think we've got to seize now control of our destiny. I think it's like what you said, we've got to take that accountability now. We've been given the moment and we need to do something about it. And I think directing our efforts and our investments to what we've said in the GM strategy. So ultimately what we're trying to achieve here is good lives for all, isn't it? Yes, of course, it's about brownfield land. Yes, of course, it's about investment, raising prices and all of those things. But what we want at the end of the day is happy, healthy people who live in good, secure housing, who can have, you know, a great family life in great, secure jobs that are well paid. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So for me, part of what we're doing now through this Trailblazer deal is we need to go back to also listening to our communities. That's really important. You know, we've got massive headlines in the deal around housing, around skills, around transport, which is amazing. But we must not, forget about listening to our communities and thinking what this means. And particularly for places like Wigan, we will be hoping to have discussions across GM to say, how do we now get more investment? How do we level up on a micro level across Greater Manchester so places aren't left behind? And I think it's absolutely amazing what's going on at Atom Valley, and I wish it great success, and we're all right behind you. But being slightly controversial, a bit tension in the room. What does that mean for the East-West divide? Because we're already potentially seeing some issues around staff leaving our absolutely fabulous college to go and work at Atom Valley because the wages are higher, the salaries are higher, and they can go and have an amazing career. So, there's impact on other places. So one of my issues is making sure through the new Trailblazer negotiations is that we don't start another divide between the east and west of the conurbation. And, I'll end on a bit of a positive, because I think one of the things that Greater Manchester has good success in is that we have collaborated over a long time. The GM team, the politicians and the officers understand each other's opportunities and also challenges. And one of the things is that we must make sure that we use this opportunity now to make sure places like Wigan Borough, for example, aren't left behind because of our challenges.
Absolutely, yeah. Mayor Dennett, do you have a kind of any words of reassurance for Alison there as Deputy Mayor of GM that that's not going to happen, in these discussions?
Well, I think we just need to look at the history of Greater Manchester, because, partnership and collaboration is at the heart of what we do, and it predates combined authorities, it predates directly elected mayors, and we know as a city region that the best way to get the most out of central government, and we've already heard it's one of the most central governments in terms of where decisions are made in Western Europe, is to basically collaborate. But not only that, it's also about how we present ourselves to the rest of the world, actually, and collaboration is really important with regards to that. And we're here today at MIPIM, aren't we? Pitching Greater Manchester to the rest of the world. And, over the years, we've done really well in terms of attracting foreign direct investment, international capital at a time when, government has not been engaging with Greater Manchester. So, continuing that partnership and that collaboration, I'm very optimistic. And we work through our difficulties. Yeah, there are moments of time when, we're trying to prioritise the priorities and some people get and other people don't. But, we remember that, and then we try and support each other in delivering each other's ambitions and projects within each of the 10 local authorities of Greater Manchester. So I'm optimistic. We know why we've got the collaboration, and we know what we've got to do. We just need to continue to build on it with our partners as well. For me, the strength of Greater Manchester is not just about the partnership between the local authorities, it's the partnership with the private sector, and it's also our partnership with our community, voluntary and social enterprise sector within Greater Manchester. It's what makes us stand out, I think, as a city region when compared with other parts of the country. It really is.
That message has certainly come across this week, yes.
So look, from, say, a Rochdale perspective, we've benefited, there's no doubt we have benefited from the success of Manchester.
For sure.
Because Rochdalians go and live, they go and work in Manchester and bring the money back and spend it in the borough. So the success of one area is not at the expense of others. Now, I appreciate, I'm not a politician, but I know there'll be political tensions. We want this, we want that. But, you said we work together, and the success of one area is not at the expense of the other. And the really big selling point that we've got for Atom Valley, which is meant to be on an international scale, is the very success of Manchester. It's now a world brand. It's recognised around the world. And that's how we're going to sell it. If we'd called it you know, and I'm a Rochdale myself, the Bury, Rochdale and Oldham mayoral development zone, nobody would have heard of it. We call it the Manchester one, and everybody has.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy, I want to come to you in a minute on that point on collaboration, but first, just a 2-minute warning. I'm coming to you guys for questions shortly, so be ready. Stephen O'Malley at the back of the room, I know you've got a question primed and ready to go. David Fairclough's laughing, but I know you've got one as well. Jeremy, on that point of collaboration, I want to, you know, that message has been loud and clear this week about the collaboration with the other local authorities and partners, but how much of a risk is politicking in Greater Manchester to the, you know, upsetting the apple cart? We saw, for example, Stockport pull out of the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. That's delayed it a couple of years. How much of a danger is that?
Thankfully, neither am I a politician, but it is a question of politics, isn't it? And politics is about managing different expectations. Everybody wants something, and not everybody can have everything at the same time. So it's the art of politics, and therefore the art of the possible. So, and I think Mayor Dennett is right in continuing to point out the extent of collaboration that allows conversations to navigate around how to deliver outcomes, whilst acknowledging that not everybody can succeed on everything at the same time. And also echoing a point Mayor Dennett was saying, in the same way as the UK can't really address a north-south divide without there being a successful London, you know, Manchester's north-south or any other divide can't be resolved without having a very successful, prosperous core business district centre. So and it's the recognition of that fact, I think, that drives the ability for the local authorities to have an adult conversation about how to deliver benefits and what does that mean in terms of spending and revenue raising as well. Okay. So I'm despite the fact that there is evidential difficulties such as the Stockport decision to pull out, you know, despite that, the other way of looking at it is everybody else is continuing to talk. So there is actually still a positive to that story. One of the outputs, I suspect, of the devolution paper yesterday is that Stockport's really going to have to seriously rethink their position on this because of the driving factor to ensure that the Greater Manchester authorities do pull together. So there is some clear hints in the papers to how the individual authorities need to continue to work together. So I think the framework is well established. But there will be fallouts in the future. There always will be. And it's how those are managed rather than pretending they're never going to exist.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the audience now. Does anyone have a question for our fantastic panel? Yes, we'll go to the back first.
Hi, hello. My name's David. I'm with the Regeneration Brainery. You may have heard a couple of times before. So you mentioned previously that there might be, because of this scheme, there might be potential for a divide between the west and the east, I believe. No,
yeah, that's right.
Sorry. And you said when talking about the counterpoint to that, you said, but because these are, you could say, like economies almost feed into each other, where if you go to Wigan, you may come in and work and then bring that money that you've earned in Manchester back out. To what extent do you think that network effect lasts, you could say? Like, is there a limit to how far you can go within that network of Manchester before that divide starts occurring?
Paul, do you want to take that?
Well, I think unless we have these connections, well, the more successful areas within a city region there are, the more successful everyone will be. You know, there's no limit. I mean, we look at but London. It's a global city. It's a world city, and there are no limits to the creation of its wealth. You know, so we want Manchester as a whole to be like that. We've still got further to aspire, and there are different areas within London, but it drags it along, it pulls it along. So I don't think there are any limits at all here. So we want the more prosperous plants, if you like, more seeds that we plant. The more it comes together, the more everybody else will benefit. Because I know that there are problems of connectivity. There are problems of connectivity in parts of Rochdale. I mean, Haywood, for example, and Middleton, they've got populations of 30,000. They don't have rail stations. you know, and that's a key thing to bring about. But everybody, it's not a big area. You know, people can get around and access good jobs and bring the money back home.
Yeah. Alison, do you want to comment on that?
Well, just to sort of continue that point, really, because if we think about a place like Lee, and we talked about our townships, it's the second biggest town in Wigan Borough, population of nearly 60,000. It hasn't got a train station. It's not in a growth location for GM. It's not going to get priority funding. We didn't get our levelling up bid for Lee. Sounds very negative. However, Lee is an amazing place with huge potential, brilliant people. The council has invested in Lee Sports Village. We've put a new youth hub in there. It's been declared a national nature reserve, so in terms of the biodiversity, carbon capture, it's on the cusp of Salford City, just down the road, and it's got the most deprived areas. And, you know, we have got developer interest there, but Lee is not connected. The young people of Lee are not connected, and until we start having serious conversations, and I know Andy Burnham is, you know, talking about the station at Golborne. It's not that near to Lee for people to get to it. You know, we've got a capacity where the lead guided busway isn't meeting demand, so we need to think about how far we're going to have conversations about Metrolink coming to places like Lee, because until we do, the people in Lee aren't going to be connected, and they're not going to be able to get into the great city jobs, into the city, into Salford, into Manchester. And we need to think about a serious conversation about how do we level up Lee. And, you know, we want to talk to people. And I think it goes back to what Paul said in terms of extending these partnerships beyond the public sector. We've got a lot of private sector interested in Lee, so it's incumbent on Wigan, through the help of GMCA, to really start to talk to them, say, how can we help Lee?
And how frustrating is it, and how much of an indication of that north-south divide is it, do you think, that there's a place like Lee, which is, you know, a large town, which is completely disconnected, doesn't have a train station, doesn't have Metrolink, and then you look at Stockport in the south, fantastic bus network, routes into town every 2 minutes more or less, takes 10 minutes on the train, and close to getting Metrolink?
It's frustrating for our residents, because we talk to them, we talk to the young people, we talk to community groups, we talk to businesses. Many of the council staff work for Wigan. They live in Lee, and, you know, you just have to listen to you know, their problems with connectivity. So it's an issue. You know, it's amazing what's going on in Stockport. You know, GM is an amazing collaboration. This isn't about a divide and rule. You know, I'm a really positive person, you know, a glass half full, to get my teeth in. So, yeah, we just need to get it right for Lee, so let's keep working on it together. Let's have serious conversations about making it connected. Let's have serious conversations about Metrolink, a train station, and what more we can do for places like Lee, who are currently not in a growth location and not probably going to get priority funding.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Thomas.
Thank you very much. Just to pick up on your connectivity point, I'm intrigued. Do we see the connectivity as always needing to go back into the hub, to the central business district, or to pick up on your point in terms of Atom Valley, to stop that risk of possibly people moving and working in that area? If we have the better connectivity, whether that's circular or across, I'm not suggesting necessarily a cross rail for Manchester, will that mean that people stay where they are, the income stays on that side, but people can move and have a better ability to get to where the jobs are?
Well, we've already got the M60, so that does go round, you know.
Yeah.
It's not very, yes, we need something more sustainable, surely.
Well,
Jeremy?
a 6-lane motorway. You know.
Jeremy, do you have a thought?
Well, I mean, it's a truism that a successful city region has to have very strong internal connections. There's no problem with understanding that. We've understood it, but we've understood it wrongly in the UK since in the post-war era. Really, we've taken it from a public transport to a private transport system in terms of the car, and so we're sort of going back and reinstalling a lot of the public transport networks that were removed. So I think connectivity is an essential, if not the essential, component in terms of enabling a city region to operate as an entity. In terms of whether it should be linear and everything going into and out of the central business district, I don't really have much of a problem with that. I think that there has to be significant movements into and out of the central business areas. Smaller extensions might be able to link parts of existing lines, and so you can probably achieve a sort of circular style system just by modest extensions or new investment. But I think opportunities rise, and whether the devolution framework will really allow Greater Manchester to take over, or Transport for Greater Manchester to take over all of the Network Rail, as it's currently known as. I think it's Great British Rail, I think it will be known as. And I can see integrating the entirety of the existing Metrolink and all the railways that affect or dissect and cross the Greater Manchester region. That would be, and so it's effectively everything becomes Metrolink in that sense. And if you compare some of the Metrolink equals, take the Metrolink system in Alicante, for example, it's a good model. You could have the Manchester Metrolink linking up with the Merseyrail and its metro system quite comfortably, and so you can improve quite a lot of transport issues by having a much more focused and integrated rail network using what's already there. I don't think it always requires totally new investment.
Yeah, and some positive noises again on that in the budget yesterday. One more question from the back. Stephen O'Malley from Civic Engineers, please.
Thanks very much, Stan. Yeah, and I feel slightly obliged to ask a question, so thanks for outing me there. But I really commend the panel. All of your collective efforts to create the opportunities, not least of which is represented in the funding that's come through in the budget that was announced yesterday. But my question, or more perhaps an observation, which ties back into the connectivity point, is just looking at the journey that, because the granularity of the districts is also quite an interesting one, I feel. So if you take Trafford, for example, you've got the town of Altrincham, which is quite an affluent town, but the journey Altrincham has been on over the last 10 years, where 10 years ago the Mary Portas Review had the town centre as one of the worst performing town centres in the country, and now designated as one of the best places to live in the northwest. Really strong narrative that emerged there, and a coordination of messaging and an alignment of the different factors and agencies responsible for the town. But picking up on your point in particular, Alison, about Lee and connectivity, you've also got places like Lim, which don't have a tram or a direct rail connection. And just thinking also about how the world has changed in the last few years around technology and working from home, and how a strong narrative and a strong offer and a sort of wider comprehensive proposition for a place can start to draw and change the dynamic and change the perception, and not just the perception, but then the experience of a place. Sorry, that's a rather long-winded sort of series of thoughts that I've attempted to try and thread together. But, here you are responsible for these really fascinating, really interesting places. Wigan's got a huge amount of history and heritage. How do you frame that in a way that's going to propel your communities forwards and really attract that sort of inward investment and offer these more interesting lifestyles for those people?
So what are you doing in Lee to make it more attractive?
So for Wigan and Lee, we've had the benefit over the last couple of days to present a lot of the work in action. So the strategy that we've got for Wigan Town Centre and for Lee Town Centre. We've got amazing projects already happening. I think we've heard quite a few speakers over the last couple of days say sometimes it's not about master planning, it's getting on and doing it, and let's see the difference. So certainly for Wigan, the town centre galleries project, it's coming down. We will be building a brand new market, a hotel, residential units. Capital and Centric are in the room, have just signed a deal with us this week to actually build SME business space right in the town centre in Wigan. It's going to be amazing. So, there'll be a massive difference. In Lee, we are putting capital investment in, so we are starting to do that. And again, what we're trying to do is get private investment interested in Lee in terms of the sites that we're collecting together and reclamation. So I think it's about action. I think it's about having a clear strategy, strong political backing, which I'm really lucky in Wigan that we have that. We have strong political control, a trust between officers, an ability to have that innovation where you're prepared to put the capital in, prepared to get on with it, prepared to take risks, And that's what we're trying to do. So I'm always optimistic, and if you look at Wigan's track record in terms of its public services, you know, we've done a lot of great work, and we want to be trailblazing as a place within Greater Manchester as well.
Yeah, I think trailblazing, probably word of the week, I would say. Jeremy, we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to come on to some of the potential low-hanging fruit that could make a tangible difference to addressing inequalities in Greater Manchester at scale and quite quickly. Jeremy, you had an interesting idea that we've chatted about previously, and I think you termed it the Robin Hood tax. So essentially a central pot of developer contributions in Greater Manchester, which can be distributed to the areas that need, you know, for example, viability gap funding.
I think yes. I think obviously from my perspective, looking at in the world of planning, I think if you can equip the mayoral team with the ability to extract through 106 or related style planning agreements monies from developments wherever in Manchester, where you can phrase it in a way that certain developments of certain value would trigger payments into a pot that could then be used to achieve or deliver on mayoral-based schemes upon whatever criteria there are, but not necessarily at all located in close proximity with the scheme from which the money has been drawn. So taking from the wealthy areas to the less wealthy areas, and hence the Robin Hood reference. But I think in addition to that, the mayor should be given proper planning powers, even if only restricted to on strategic sites. That would be a good start. I mean, that would follow the pattern in London, where the mayor was originally just a consultee, then could direct, and now has engaged fully in planning. So I think the mayor, if my Robin Hood idea were to be manifest, I think it would have to be coupled with some further engagement in being able to grant planning and be more involved in the actual issuing of planning permissions.
Yeah. Mayor Dennett, is that workable politically? Would Stockport pay for projects, you know, viability funding in Bury, for example?
I mean, it's a really interesting idea, but I think we all know in this room that often Section 106 payments or community infrastructure levy payments don't ever actually deliver everything we want to deliver in policy terms as a local authority. So there's already a gap in terms of what we've articulated in our local plan or PFE in terms of our policy aspirations and what's actually coming through the planning committees and what's being delivered through Section 106 or SIL. Hence why, you know, yesterday government announced £150 million worth of brownfield housing fund monies. Why did they do that? They did that because they fundamentally know development in Greater Manchester and the North more generally has huge viability constraints. So, yeah, it's a really tricky one. And don't forget, when these agreements are reached, they're legally binding agreements and they're very specific to the development that's being brought forward. And the whole rationale of 106 and SIL is to offset the impact of that development on the local community or address some of those communities' aspirations. So if we're going to be moving a million miles away from that in terms of pooling some of this at a GM level, then I can see communities and residents being pretty upset about that in terms of when development is brought forward and then not necessarily getting what they want out of those negotiations. So I do think it is quite a tricky one. I mean, the government were talking about this as well at a national level, which would be a real concern of mine, because that's, you know, Westminster and Whitehall determining what happens with developer contributions, which would be, you know, a nightmare as far as I'm concerned. But no, I think this is tricky. I think what we need to continue to do is try and deliver on our strategies for our places and support each other in doing that, however we find the cash to do that.
Yeah. Paul, you were making a note there, and I'm intrigued as to what you were writing down.
Oh, well, I mean, 2 points. First of all, I mean, following on the previous question and what's being done, say, in the borough of Rochdale, well, part of Aston Valley is already open. There's a new development in South Haywood, which is probably the most deprived part of, certainly of Rochdale Borough, H Park, where 1,000 large, high-quality family homes are being built for the explicit purpose so that people, it's ready access to central Manchester. And that itself has got the potential to transform the town of Haywood. And we're also looking with our joint venture partner to site a high-tech industry there, which leads me on to the point. It's on the side of our building, but none of us mentioned tonight innovation. And for me, that's really the key, to actually what we're trying to do in Atom Valley is to we've got two research centres being built, one on advanced machinery, which the National Physical Laboratory are meant to deliver, and we've just got some money confirmed yesterday for a sustainable materials centre. But if you look at successful clusters around the world or around Europe, they all have very strong research links, very strong connections to universities. They're based on innovation, and it's innovation that creates not just high-paid jobs at the frontiers, but I said on a platform here yesterday, innovative firms pay more at all skill levels. Innovation is a way in which we address inequality and which we solve the problems of social mobility. That's what we need. That should be our central thrust, thinking about how do we innovate, how do we get innovative firms, how do we encourage this, how do we build more research centres, and for me that's the real key to success, and that should be our policy focus.
Absolutely. Alison, you were nodding along there, and I know that you're passionate about the skills agenda, and that's something that we spoke about before this session. Do you have anything to add to what Paul was saying there about innovation and skills?
I just totally agree in terms of, I think actually it is a strength of GM if, you know, what we've done in terms of this Trailblazer deal is innovation. And if you look at what's going to happen with the post-16 technical and skills education, yes, we could have made more progress. Yes, it's still a little bit frustrating that there isn't bigger pots of money coming on skills and education training. But as Mayor Dennett said, we're making progress, and that's what we've got in this new deal. And, you know, we can link up opportunities across the conurbation to do better things on skills, and, you know, let's really focus in on it. That's the key, particularly for places like Wigan, where we've got low productivity and low skill levels, and that's what we need to really work on.
Yeah. How concerned with, or how much should our enthusiasm be tempered, Jeremy, do you think, from the budget yesterday by the fact that there's probably going to be a general election very soon? Things may change. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as Mayor Dennett said, the spending part of the devolution paper is postponed until the next spending review. So when that'll be influenced, of course, by the timetable for a general election. Although it is a political move, I can't see whichever party, although you might guess which the next party might be the governing party. I don't think there's going to be any radical change taking back from where the paper is. If anything, I would thought it would move even further forwards. And so in that sense, it might actually just be one small step today and a bigger step tomorrow. In that sense, I think what should be celebrated though about the paper is that the success, the paper has built upon the success of what Manchester has achieved. And the conversation that's taking place today reflects the fact there has been a considerable period of success. And really, this is talking about next steps and what to do next and how to almost begin to micromanage some of the other issues that affect the Greater Manchester region. And so there has to be a celebratory element of this conversation that says it the paper and the approach being set out endorses what has been achieved to date, and also emphasises that the prospects are there for those successes to continue. So I think Manchester can be relaxed about the prospect of somehow the paper failing the test of another general election. I don't think that will be a problem. Okay. I suspect, if anything, I said it would move forwards. Yeah. But, I mean, the comparison earlier about Scotland and Wales. I mean, Andy Burnham said yesterday, I think, on American radio that it puts it in line with the spending model of the single settlement, referring to, in line with. So I think you know the very fact that the mayor's office is going to be held responsible for spending money, and there are new accountability proposals in place to understand how the expenditure decisions are made, is very supportive and instructive for the future of Manchester, and I can't see those being watered down.
Okay. Paul, you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, in terms of thinking about the general election, now not everybody will have seen it, but in January, the Guardian newspaper had an editorial saying that the Atom Valley model was the model for growth in the English regions. So I'm hoping that that editorial was read by every member of the shadow cabinet. Not that I'm anticipating the result of the next election.
You may have seen, the food and the beers are starting to arrive.
Everybody's head turned around. Yeah. They're just like following.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring things to a close very, very shortly. But Mayor Dennett, I want to ask you the final question probably, and that is, when you are Mayor of Greater Manchester, because that is seems to be, you know, if you read around, that seems to be what's going to happen. What will be the changes that you will make? What kind of Mayor will you be for Greater Manchester in the context of this conversation that we're having about levelling up?
So for me, I've always prioritised tackling poverty and inequality in my mayoralty in the city of Salford. And you know, for those who know some of the work I've been doing at a Greater Manchester level, you'll know about my passion for truly affordable housing. And Mayor Burnham has done great things around tackling homelessness and rough sleeping. And, you know, we have a myriad of initiatives now to try and deliver on that agenda across Greater Manchester. But increasingly, you know, now I've taken on responsibilities for health and social care, we're increasingly challenged around those wider determinants of health and well-being. And I think for me, it's that space that I want to get us into, you know, whatever the future is. And this isn't me agreeing to be the next mayoral candidate for Greater Manchester, by the way, just to put that on the record. But seriously, we do need to get into the preventative agenda. We need to get into, you know, those long-standing inequalities, structural inequalities in Greater Manchester. And for me, the priority has to continue to be housing. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of need doesn't have shelter at the base for no reason. You know, we can't sustain a normal life without giving someone a place to call home, you know, let alone become economically independent or reach the heavy heights of self-actualization that Maslow talked about. So seriously, ensuring we tackle the housing and homelessness crisis has to continue to be the number one priority for me, because that is how we properly level up Greater Manchester, providing someone with a place to call home where they can build a family, they can build a life, and those homes have got to be affordable, whether they're owned or whether they're rented. And that is a huge challenge, not just for Greater Manchester, but for the entire country. But I'm determined that we've put a policy framework in place now, and what we've got to get into is delivering on that agenda now. Yeah. We really have. And delivery has to be our priority moving forward. I mean, we're in the middle of these NHS reforms at the moment, and it feels like we're going backwards, you know, devising another 5-year statutory plan for health and social care in Greater Manchester. We've already done all of this work over many, many years since we had health devolution. And actually, where we need to be going as Greater Manchester is delivering for the people of our city region, not necessarily engaging yet again, in that policy and strategy space. I mean, I think it was Max Weber that said, bureaucracy has a tendency to create more of itself despite the best intentions. And I think it's all of our jobs to try and constrain that and actually focus on the things that matter, which is getting things done for the people of Greater Manchester.
Yeah, a great message to finish on, and you can all go back after a fantastic week in Cannes to Greater Manchester and you know, follow those words. I think a round of applause, please, for our fantastic panelists. As I said before, great pleasure to be able to chair the last session on the Manchester Stand. Thank you very much to the panellists. It's been a great week. Let's go back to Greater Manchester and sort of make good on the good intentions that we've talked about here. I'm going to invite Joanne Roney, Chief Executive of Manchester City Council, to the stage to close things off.
I've never had to undress Paul Dennett before I speak, but such is the extent of the collaboration here in Greater Manchester. Look, I've got some good news for you all. Firstly, the end is in sight. Not the world. It's not another pitch on net zero. It is just the end of our stand here at MIPIN and our presentations here in MIPIN. I don't know about you, but my voice is going. So the second bit of good news is this is going to be short. And I think the third bit of good news is I stand before you and drink a drink. Now, I know that's rare here in MIPIN, but I'm sure you can squeeze a short drink down with us. I really wanted to just say a few words on behalf of Paul and Damon, who's had to get a flight back, about how successful I think MIPIN has felt for me this year and for us this year. But most importantly, I hope it's been good for you. We said at the start, the opening, about 4 years ago, or whenever that was when we first got here, that we come here to do work. And I think we have all worked incredibly hard. And it's the work, I think it was just the point that was just being made, actually. It's the work we do today, the connections we make today, but how they continue through when we get back to the ranch and wider. I was going to kind of pick out some highlights, but actually when I started to go through the highlights, I would have been up here for about 3 hours, because genuinely there was such a lot of content that we've produced here today. It wouldn't be fair of me to pick out some bits over other bits, because each of the sessions were good. But I thought I'd say something just by way of numbers. So we've had over 20 sessions on this stand, and we've had hundreds of people visit this stand during the course of the week. We started with those global connections, and that's carried on with the conversations with Stockholm, with Antwerp, with Portugal. And some of the other things that we've been doing have not been on this stand. So between me, Paul and Eamon, we've covered 16 additional sessions off this stand, global sessions. So not only do we spend our time here strengthening Greater Manchester, but we spend our time selling Greater Manchester across the globe, and that was one of our key missions. I think the other point to make is we talk about collaboration, but it's when you see that collaboration, when you see me and Paul and Eamon alongside other UK cities, particularly those of us in the north with the brand of the Northern Powerhouse and needing to evidence and unify our economic potential and our asks of what more we could do to contribute to UK PLC. Each of our sessions had a theme to them, and I think that's just important, that we stick with those messages around innovation. We stick to thinking through sustainability of future growth for future generations, and most importantly for all, that we have that ambition of creating a fairer society at the heart of what we do through all of our partnerships. Having said I didn't want to pick out some highlights because it wouldn't be fair, I do hope you found the impromptu budget and devolution session that Paul and I and Damon cobbled together in about 15 minutes. But how much content was in that in terms of future opportunities? So that budget, that devolution deal, that comes about as a result of the conversations we have with each other at MIPIN and in other forums. That's where we get our ideas from. Now, I've said how great the sessions were. Not all of you could make all of the sessions, but the other bit of good news for you is that they're all being live streamed and they are all available. The content is all available to see. So if you don't think you've seen enough of me and Paul, you can watch us Saturday if you're not tired of us. Let me give you some numbers in terms of the reach, not just the content, but the reach. So these live stream sessions, you'll be interested to know, have been seen by 1.3 million people. So it's not just the people in front of you that have been listening to what we've been talking about here today. That's 1.3 million people. And we've had 37 articles in national press talking about what Greater Manchester's been talking about what you've been talking about. So that is a big impact and a big reach. I think I'll end by a couple of points. I said at the start, and I'll say it again, none of this is possible without the support of our business partners and yourself. It matters to us that you've had a good time, that it's been of value to you. I really do need your feedback. Somebody once told me that feedback was a gift. Well, it's the gift that keeps on giving. We get stronger when you tell us what you need and what we can do to improve on what's been hopefully a successful MIPIM, but we want to make it better, we want to make it relevant to you. So please do feel free to give us that gift of feedback and tell us what you'd like to see more of, less of, or do differently. In thanking our business partners for helping us make a success of Greater Manchester and Greater Manchester at MIPIM, I also want to thank the staff again. They've knocked their socks off. Can we have a round of applause for the team here, really? They actually haven't stopped at all. I also want to thank the teams from our respective councils, all of the chief execs and the teams behind us. Paul, myself, Eamon, Alison, we can't do what we do without our colleagues who've been alongside us today, helping to follow through on some of the conversations and the deals. So thanks to all the teams from across local government who are here. I have to say a big thank you to Paul. Paul, I'm standing here to close it, but it's been great to have that work with yourself, with Eamon, with me, hopefully pulling together the programme and making this a successful mission. So thank you very much for your leadership, Paul. Andy Who, that's what I'm going to say. Deputy Mayor of Greater Manchester, you've done an outstanding job, Paul. Thank you for leading our delegation today. And my final bit of news for you all would be to say that drinks are going to be served. We have just heard that the Minister for Investment, Lord Johnson, is coming to speak to you all on the stand. So for those of you who can make your drink last for half an hour, we're expecting him at some point later today. He's keen to come to Manchester. He wants to meet with you. He wants to talk to you. He wants to have a drink with us. And I think that, again, is a testament to what we've talked about here, what we've talked about elsewhere. Government want to come onto the stand and come and listen to talk to us about what you think about investments and moving forward. So once again, a huge, huge thank you for your consent, your support, for being with us on this journey. My final bit of good news is it's not raining in Manchester on Friday. So whilst I can't promise you sunshine, I can promise you won't be getting wet. And so let's see you back safely in Manchester, and let's carry on doing the business. Thank you all very, very much.